What's going on, everybody? So like the title says, today we are going to mix some death metal in Studio One Pro 6. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in my tracks. The only thing that I've gotten done here yet is just the tempo map and the time signature changes here. So I'm going to just Control A, Control A, get all my tracks, and I'm just going to pull them in to the start of the session. Everything should line up properly. We'll wait for all the peaks to be built. So yeah, for some reason, when I exported the stems from Cubase, because I mixed this originally in Cubase, but I bounced out the raw stems from there to mix everything exported as stereo. I know a good chunk of this is actually going to need to be mono tracks. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is fold them down to mono. You can see here, this button, this is your mono stereo selector. If you have any mono tracks that are ever, bounced out of stereo, but they should be mono, you can fold them down to mono here. I'll do that for all my drum close mics. All right. Here are the spot mics on the cymbals. These all need to be mono. I'll pan these out here in a bit. Mono room, that should be mono. Now these sample tracks here, these are actual stereo sample tracks. So bass reamp should be mono. Bass reamp should be mono. The bass DI should be mono. These guitar tracks should be mono. And I wonder if I can do all these at once. Let's see. I can. Sweet. Yeah, all these are vocals here at the end. They need to be mono. So now that I've gotten everything that should be mono folded down to mono, I'm going to go through and I'm going to color code these. This is the first thing that I do when I mix a song, is I color code everything. This first track, it is just it's a bounce of the mix that I did for the song. So I'm just going to grab that and I'm going to mute it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of my drum tracks. This goes all the way down here to the drum room samples. I'm going to open up my mixer window. I'm going to get rid of that because I don't need the list of all the tracks. And then I'm just going to, since I've got all these highlighted, what I did there was I held Control Shift. I can show you again. So I'll scroll up to the first track. I'll hold Control Shift. I'll click on the first one. And then I'll scroll down until I get to the end of my drum tracks, hold Control Shift again, bam, that will select everything between the first selected track and the last selected track. So now I can open up my mix window and I can click down in this corner. I like making all my drum tracks blue, so I'm going to make them blue. Then these three here are my bass tracks. I make my bass tracks purple, and then I've got guitar from here to here. I like making my guitar tracks green because I'm a guitar player and green's my favorite color, so it makes sense. And then everything remaining will be vocals. I like making my vocals yellow. So the next thing that I'm going to do now that I've gotten everything color coded and folded to mono that needs to be mono, I'm going to start doing some subgroups here. So you can see I've got a couple different kick tracks, a few different snare tracks. I've got some toms. I've got a bunch of different cymbals. I've got some room samples here. I'm going to group these down. So rather than having like individual tracks that I can control and process things on, I'll have groups. And a lot of this I will process as a group rather than just on an individual track. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my little mix window here. And I'm going to hold Control again, and I'm going to click the two tracks here that I want to add to my kick group. I'm going to right click. I'm going to find Pack Folder. I'm going to name this Kick Sum. And then I'm going to hit this little drop down menu and I'm going to hit Add Bus Channel. What this does is down here in our mixer, it creates a group track or a bus for the kick. So now we just have kick. Or I'll let you hear what this all sounds like. So this is what it sounds like when you drop a song in. It's just a complete mess. Nothing's panned. There's no stereo image. Everything's just up the center. But we're going to deal with that. After we get these like organized and grouped a little better, we'll start dealing with that. So here are all my snare tracks. Again, Control Shift, click on the first track, click on the last track, right click, pack folder, snare sum, because this is where all my snare tracks are going to be summed once I add the bus channel. And I like making my drum group tracks a lighter shade of blue, just so I can find them quickly. And then I'm going to do the same thing for all my toms. Back down to the mix window, make that my light blue. And then for all of these cymbals, I'm going to grab all of them. Again, pack the folder. Call that cymbal sum. And add bus channel. Then I'll make that the lighter blue. The last subgroup for the drums will be the stereo room samples. We've gotten all them selected. Right click, pack folder. I'll just call that room samples. Add bus channel. Bam. Make that a lighter blue. And then, so I like to just over on the right hand side have a group of buses that are just drums, guitars, bass, vocals. So I'm going to make that group for the drums. What I'll do here is I'll hold control and I'll select my kick sum, my snare sum, my tom sum, my cymbal sum, basically everything in the drums that shows main as being the output. I'm going to select all these now because everything that's going to a subgroup bus, I'm going to now route that to the bus. So then I'm going to right click here on the channel, then add bus for selected channels. Then I will now have a drum bus. Then if I hit this, it will just solo all my drums. And then I'm just going to drag this guy way over here to the right, all the way to the far right-hand side of my mix window. Then for my bass tracks, I'm not going to use any folders here on my bass tracks. I'm just going to select all 3 bass tracks, add bus for selected channels, bass bus, bam. Move this all the way over here. Now this will just bass, just drums. And then for my guitars, I do like to subgroup my guitars. In Cubase, the button to make your mix console go away is up here. So I just go and I click right where I should in Cubase to make that go away in Studio One. It makes me go to the home screen. I only produce and track in Studio One now. I only mix in Cubase these days. So apologies for the Cubase shit that I'm doing here that's causing problems. All right, so now I'm going to add a rhythm sum. These are just my rhythm guitar tracks that I've packed to a folder. Call that rhythm sum. Add bus channel, bam. And then I'm going to do that for my leads as well. Add bus channel, bam. And then down here on the vocals, we've got the vocal mains here, which I'm going to leave in the center. I'm pretty sure that the rest of these vocals, we've got some tracks here that aren't used, so I'm going to get rid of them. Bam, so I've gotten rid of everything that's not used. But yeah, you can see, because the representation of how I had things panned in Cubase is still here, so I'm just going to pack folder here. Add bus channel. I'm going to call that Vox Stereo 1. Then I'll do the same thing here. Vox Stereo 2. Add bus channel. Vox Stereo 3. Add bus channel. Vox Stereo 4. Bam. So that should handle all the subgroups. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to grab all of my guitar tracks that are showing main as the output here. I'm going to right click, add bus for selected channels. So now I've got a guitar bus. For the leads on this, I just exported DIs, and we'll dial in a quick lead tone here in a little bit. Oh, where did the rest of my buses go? Oh, they got dragged over here. Okay, so drag these back to where they should be. Thank you, Studio One, for that. And then, so I've got my guitar bus. Yep, guitar bus. And then I've got vocals that still need to go to a vocal bus. So everything on vocals, everything in my vocal section here that shows main as the output, we're going to grab, we're going to add bus to selected channels. This is going to be vocal bus. All right, so the very last thing that I'm going to do here as far as my routing goes is I'm going to add a bus for all these buses. This is going to be my mix bus. My mix bus I always make red. This first track in the session is a print of the mix that I originally did for this song, and I'm going to play that really quick. All right, so that's what the original mix sounded like. Here is where we're at right now with everything. Yeah, so I mean, if you've never heard an unmixed song, like, it's not a pleasant time. But you know, we're gonna make it sound dope. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start panning some stuff out. So all of these vocal tracks that we've got stereo groups of, we're just gonna pan them hard left, hard right. Bam, 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 bam. And this is gonna be where our width comes from in the track, is the way that we're panning things. So these are just rhythm guitar DIs. I'm gonna turn them down and mute them because they're not being used for the rhythm guitars. The leads should be in the center, so we're just gonna leave them there. I'm going to pan out the left and the right guitars. These won't need panned because they're stereo sample tracks, and their panning will be baked into the waveforms. We're going to pan the crash left, crash right, hard right. We're going to pan our hi-hats way over this way. Our splashes, I think they were a little bit right of center on the kit. The China will pan pretty hard to the right, and the ride will kind of stick in between the splash and the China. And then I know that these are a little hot, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag them down some. Our toms will pan the rack tom, which this is the close mic. This is a sample track. We're going to pan them probably about 67 to 70% to the left. This one will tuck in probably about 12% to the left. The floor tom here will put probably about 50 to 60% to the right to give our drums a little bit of spread through the tom rolls and that kind of thing. And so now this should sound a little bit better just because everything's panned out. Much better. Just the panning makes that much of a difference. So let's see how our gain staging's looking. And what I'm looking for when I'm gain staging is how high this output meter is bouncing here. So we're riding up we're getting pretty close to zero. So I like at my mix bus, when I'm doing my gain staging, I like to be coming somewhere between -12 and -6. That's where I like to peak at there. Typically will leave me enough headroom to process things without hitting the mix bus too hard. So the way that I will deal with this is I'm going to hit this little wrench over here in Studio One Oh, and I've already got input controls enabled. But if you don't see this stuff up here at the top of the track, that's your input controls. What you've got is a polarity flip, and you have an input trim, which are both super handy tools. All this was phase aligned, and the polarities all in line, just because I exported it from the mix session. That's something that I handled with all the drums. Anytime you're dealing with a multi-mic'd drum kit, which you can see, I mean, we've got close to 30 tracks just of drums. It's important to get your phase relationships in check, which, you know, you're going to have to do a little bit of learning on your own on that. That's just outside of the scope of this video. So I want everything together to be hitting -12 to -6. So, I mean, the first thing that I'll normally do, because nothing's too unruly at the tracks. I mean, we're -12 to -6 here. Our snare's hanging out like under -12. Everything's pretty reasonably gain staged, just straight at dropping it in. So something that I'll do just to keep the output level from getting too rowdy will just be grab all my main buses here, and I'll just turn this down a little bit. And if I've got them all selected, you can see that these will all move in tandem. If everything's responsibly gained on the way in, you know, you may only have to do a little bit of work here. If something is less responsibly gained on the way in, I mean, you may find that you're doing this on, you know, every channel, and that's okay. I like to do it using the input controls rather than like clip gaining the waveforms, because if you're doing like a big project, like this was one song from an EP, I wanted to be able to have one session that was pretty much like the mix for the entire thing. If you're clip gaining waveforms, that's going to cause problems when you go from one song to the other. If you do this at the input trim on the channel and the DAW, assuming that everything was tracked consistently, it should apply pretty well from one song to another. And, you know, we all track this pretty consistently. It was me and two of my friends that actually engineered this. I did all the guitar and bass at my place. My buddy Tyler, he recorded all the drums. You know, he wrote the drums, he performed the drums, he edited the drums, he sent them to me. They were beautiful for me to just drop in and mix, which is a big part of the reason this turned out as good as it did. And my friend Marcus tracked all the vocals. My buddy Seth, Seth is the dude who actually did the vocals on this. He went to our buddy Marcus's place, and Marcus is an excellent engineer as well. And yeah, so everything is tracked super well, super consistently. So it was very easy for me to take the mix that I did for the record and apply it to all the songs, just because, you know, everything was super consistent on the front end. So we're pretty some of those peaks are still a little rowdy, so I may drag this back just a touch, just to give me a little bit more headroom once I hit the mix bus. Yeah, that works. So we'll go ahead and we'll start building out our channel strips. So when it comes to actually building out the channels, like, I have a pretty good idea what tools I'm going to use on what sources, like, going into it. So I'm just going to start there, and we'll get to dialing everything in once we've got the entire session prepped. I don't just, you know, add one track at a time. I get everything ready to go. That way I can just jump in and mix. So we'll start by building our drum channels. The very first thing that I like to run on drums is this virtual mix rack from Slate Digital. Once it loads in, we'll check it out. All right, so I'm using this for one module, and that is this virtual channel. And I like this Brit in mode. This is something that I put on pretty much every channel, just because it just does something that I like. Make sure the gain staging is okay. I want this to kind of be hanging between -5 to -1. I don't really want it to go into the red, because it can sound kind of too extreme there. But I'm just going to add this to all the drum tracks, and then I'll solo out the drum bus, and I'll turn it off and back on. That way you can kind of hear what it does. It's a saturation plugin. And with saturation plugins, you kind of got to be careful because all they really are is a distortion algorithm and an EQ curve. So sometimes they can fool you into thinking they sound better, but they really don't. But this one, I really like it, and I use it on every mix that I do. So I'm comfortable using it in this context. So here's just what it does just by itself, just having it on the tracks. Without it. With it. And this is engaging all these. Yeah, see, it just does something that I like. It's kind of hard to explain. So the next thing that I'm going to add to all my drum tracks, and this is everything that is going to the drum bus, is going to get these plugins. First, I'm going to add this to all the stereo tracks, which is all my buses, because there are separate mono and stereo versions. I'm looking for the Waves SSL EV2 channel stereo. Bam, we're just going to add this to all our drum tracks. I love SSL channels on drums, and you'll see why here in a moment. Match that blue to the rest. There we go. And then here on this mono room track, I'm going to add the mono version of this plugin. And then I'm going to get all these drum tracks. The next plugins that I'm going to add, it doesn't matter. Actually, I'm going to get the cymbal sum, the room sample, the mono room, and I'm going to add this Purple Audio MC77 compressor. The reason I like this here is because this is actually my favorite. This is my favorite hardware 1176. So the plugin was on sale for super cheap a while back, and I was like, "Yep, got it." And then we're gonna add just the stock Studio One EQ. It's a plugin called Pro EQ. I actually like this a lot. And then after that, we're going to just add a plugin called JST Heat, which that is a clipping and or saturation plugin. Don't use it all the time, but I do like having it on my strip when I'm starting, just in case I decide to use it. I can just load it up and be good to go. So heat is bypassed. And then I'm going to move on to my bass tracks. I know for a fact that I just used the alpha. What I did here is I had the DI and I shot out reamps from a couple different dark glass hardware pieces, one being the Alpha Omega Photon, one being the Atom. I wound up using the Alpha Omega Photon for the album just because I thought it had the more like top endy, just aggressive kind of like bitey bass tone, where the Atom was more low end focused, which would be great for like deathcore or gent or something like that. But for the death metal stuff, I thought the Alpha Omega Photon ripped. So again, virtual mix rack, because it's awesome. Just Brit in, and then here I'm going to go with the Purple Audio, the MC77 again, because I really like the 1176 style compression on bass. Then the handy dandy Pro EQ. I'll just have all that hanging out there. And then for my rhythm sum, I do process my rhythm guitars as a group. So what I'm going to do here is just virtual mix rack. And then I'm going to get the Waves SSL EQ stereo. I'm going to bypass that because I'm not going to dial that in yet. I'm going to get the Waves Pultec stereo. I'm going to bypass that because I'm not using it yet. And then I'm going to add an instance of Pro EQ. I'm going to move that here, and then I'm going to add this this JST Bus Glue Guitars plugin. I really like that on guitars, and I put that after my graphic EQ. Again, I'm going to bypass this for now because I'm not using it quite yet. So we're going to hop over here to the lead guitars. Again, the lead guitars I will process as their own tracks. Actually, I need to wait to add this because we need to dial in like a super quick lead guitar tone. And I'll just use Archetype Gojira X. I really like this amp sim. So that's what I'm going to use here for the lead guitar tones. We'll just dial in something super quick that will work well for this track. All right, so I'm just going to start with everything hanging out here at noon. Leave that bypass for now. Bump that way down. What mics I got here? We'll start with just the 414 and we'll cycle through some different mics. Let's see. Make a little loop region. That way we can just loop this. I like to dial in my cab tone first. I'm going to try the 121 for my main mic. Ooh, that 414 is actually tasty. So let me try adding in a 160, and I'll put that kind of over here closer to where the cap and the cone meet. That's cool. I like that. Let's hop over to the amp. Probably pull that gain back a little bit. Probably boost some mids. Treble. Alright. And then let's smack it with an overdrive. We'll crank that level. Put that tone probably a little above noon. I'm going to give this a little bit of distortion. And then need some delay and reverb. So turn on the reverb, turn on the delay. I'm going to make the time on this. We'll do a quarter note. There we go. I like that a lot for the lead guitar tone. And I know for a fact that there's some noise on the DIs, so I'm just going to get rid of that real quick. So I don't remember what track it was in, but I know it was there, and I know I need to deal with it. So it should be good there. And then this lead cycles back in later in the song, so I'll need to do the same thing there. All right, that. All right, so now I'm going to build out my lead guitar processing chain. So virtual mix rack is going to happen. And then I'm also going to add the SSL EV, EV2 channel mono. Because, you know, I like the SSL channel on pretty much everything, especially drums, but I also like it a lot on lead guitars. And then I'll add in an instance of Pro EQ. And then from there, going to move on to the vocals. For the vocals, I process them all individually as well, rather than processing them at a bus. So I'll drag over my virtual mix rack. This is going to copy this to all these tracks. And then I'll grab the SSL EV channel mono. And then Purple Audio MC77. Again, because the 1176 style compressors are also awesome on vocals. And then I'll give them a Pro EQ, and I'll probably end up adding a de-esser later, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So now we're just going to check our gain staging with everything as it is now. Cymbal spots are still kind of hot. I'll bring them down a bit. All right, so now we're gonna add some things to our main buses. Something that I like to add to my drum, bass, guitar, and vocal bus is the Slate virtual tape machines. And on the buses, I like to use it on the 16 track and the FG9 mode, or FG456. And I'm just going to check the gain staging here. Because this is one that it sounds good, but when it goes into the red and when this clip light flashes, it's not a good time. So I want to responsibly gain stage that. And then I'm going to let you hear this like full track with and without these, with and without this tape machine, because again, this is something that I just add to my buses just because it does a cool thing. Again, remember saturation plugins, whether it's a tape saturation plugin, transformer saturation plugin, what have you, it is all a combination of a distortion algorithm and an EQ curve. So be mindful of how these things are impacting what you're doing. I've used these enough to know that I like what they do, so I continue to use them. Here's what it sounds like with and without. It just adds a little weight, a little meat. Yeah, so it's just something that I run on my buses. And then we're going to hop over here to the mix bus because I do what's called top-down mixing. I mix into a plug-in chain on my mix bus. So the very first thing I'm going to add is, again, the Slate mix rack. And with this, I'm going to trash everything because I'm looking for a specific module called VCC Mix Bus. This is the Virtual Console collection. But the mix bus version, again, Brit in, I think is the law. And I'm going to adjust this input gain here until I'm hanging -3 to -1. That should give me plenty of headroom. All right, so we're good there. Then after this, I add a bus compressor, and I want the Waves SSL G bus compressor. I don't want the UAD. I'm just going to use the Waves. Let me just scroll down here to my Waves folder. Waves SSL. I think that's SSL Comp Stereo. Yeah. Yeah, we're just going to use the good old-fashioned Waves solid-state Logic G Master bus compressor. I really like the SSL style bus compression across a mix, just because it has a sound that I like. I pretty much use the same settings. I use a 4:1 ratio. I use the slowest attack. I use the fastest release. I will adjust this side chain filter. What this does is this will remove low end from the detection portion of the compressor, so you can prevent your bass guitar and your kick drum really from triggering this compressor, and it'll help keep the low end from causing the entire mix to pump. Some people don't use side chain filters. Some people believe in controlling things in a different way down the pipes further. That's all well and good. I like to dial this in so that really hard snare hits, I'm getting about 3 to 4 decibels of gain reduction using the threshold control. So let's go ahead and we'll just dial this in. You can hear how it's kind of, it's a little weird. It's getting pumpy. Where if I bring up this filter about 150, 160 hertz, I can dig into this threshold a bit more. without, with. May even bring up the sidechain filter a bit more. Come off of that threshold a touch. With, without. There it is. It gives it a little bit more glue, a little bit more cohesion just straight away. Without. With. All right, and then the next thing that I'll do is I'll add this Eosis Air Earth EQ. Really good sounding EQ. I like to just use it to add a little low end bump, a little high end bump, give the whole mix kind of like a smiley face EQ curve. That air band is nice. Earth band, same way, super tasty. With, without. With, without. So then I like to add another instance of the tape machine, but this time on 2-track and FG9. With, without. All right, so there's that. And then after the tape machine, I'm just going to throw on an instance of Flatline from Submission Audio, which is it's a mastering limiter / soft clipper. I like running it on hybrid mode. I'll just kind of set these around here, and I'll usually just when I'm getting started doing a mix, I'll just drag this down until I'm getting a little tiny bit of gain reduction on this. Yeah, so you can see it's not doing a ton. The red bits there, you know, what it's actually doing and reducing in volume. Not a ton here. That will change as we get deeper into this mix, but this is just kind of where I set this to start, just because it will kind of help me get an idea of what everything's going to sound like when it's done. So now that everything is gain staged and set up, we should probably start mixing the thing. I'm going to do a little bit more gain staging here at these buses. I'm going to pull down the guitar and the bass some more. All right. That should probably get us right and get us at a good place to start. So I'm going to mute the guitar, bass, and vocal buses for now. And we're going to focus on the drums to get started. So we're going to hop over here to our drum section of our session here. And I'm going to just mute all the drum samples because I will do some balancing with the drum samples now. So I'm just going to pull them all down to 0. And I'm going to let you hear this is just what the raw drums that Tyler recorded and sent to me. And I'm also I'll take out these room samples also for a second. This is just the raw drums that Tyler sent. Just check out how dope they sound. I'm going to drag these spot mics down just a touch again. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to bring the samples in. The samples really aren't doing much in this song. I wanted really to emphasize the live drum recordings that Tyler sent over, just because, I mean, the homie really crushed them, as you just heard. So let's go ahead and blend in our kick sample. And this is just the kick sample. Just the Tyler kick with the sample, without it. Not a huge difference, right? So do the same thing on the snare. I'm also going to bring down the snare bottom a bit, and the snare top condenser, it's a really good sounding source track, but it's got a lot of low end pop to it, so I will drag that down by a couple decibels. And here's just the snare sample. Not adding much at all with it, without it. So now I'm going to bring in, I need to find a bit with a good amount of toms, and I know that this chorus. Again, that's just the live toms, and I'm going to bring in my samples. Yeah, so again, the samples aren't doing a ton. They're just there to reinforce it. I didn't want to replace the drums, right? I wanted to just reinforce what was there. And then lastly, I've got these room mic samples, which just add a little bit of length and a little bit of life to the drums, because they're pretty dry, which is cool. Dry drums work really well with death metal, but I did want to liven them up a touch. Those are maybe just a hair too hot. Yep, I think that's it. Yep. All right, so let's find where the drums really kind of. Yeah, so we'll start right here. We'll just make us a little loop region, so we can just start vibing, start cranking out some drums, and I will bounce around between this part and the chorus. Actually, I want. Yeah, this is what I want. Yep. Okay. Perfect. That's my loop region, and let's EQ a kick drum, shall we? All right. So I'm going to load up my SSL channel strip. And the very first thing that I'm going to do on the SSL channel strip is I'm going to start dialing in my EQ. With drums, especially in metal, it's pretty commonplace to boost some top end, to get some click out of it, to boost some upper mids, to scoop some lower mids, and then to boost some low end. So let's check out what that sounds like. This on these SSL channel strips, this 8K shelf here is just kind of magical. So check out what happens when we boost this a bit. Yeah, and then we'll boost some upper mids. With the upper mid boost, I'll just throw, a 3 to 9 decibel boost, and I'll just sweep the frequency around here just to find where it sounds best and where it sits best with the track. I think around 6K is kind of the sweet spot there, so back that off to about a 3 decibel boost. The 6 is, I think it's a bit too much. We'll land there between 3 and 6. And then with drums in general, especially kick drums, there's usually some mud between 2 and 300 hertz. What I'll normally do here, I'll just, again, throw a boost up, sweep around until I find it. there. We'll scoop some of that out. And then under that, something that I'll do is I'm going to boost some low end, and usually I'll end up boosting somewhere between 1 and 200 hertz. Same deal, I'll just kind of throw on a boost and I'll sweep it around. That's too much sub for death metal. Right here, I think, is the sweet spot. And another thing that's important is when you're doing like EQ, it's important to kind of listen before and after. And it's also important to try and level match, because our brains can trick us into thinking something is better just because it's louder. So, I mean, the EQ moves, I mean, you can see I'm adding a significant amount of gain here with these EQ moves. So it's important to compensate for that on the back end of the plugin, just so you can make sure that it's actually making a positive impact without, with, without, with. And then for compression on this, I like to, on drums, I like about a 3.5 to 1 ratio. I'll normally opt for a pretty quick release time, and I'll just drag this threshold until I'm getting somewhere between 3 and 6 decibels of gain reduction. That just gives it a little bit of consistency. The SSL compressor, the channel compressor, kind of adds a little bit of smackiness to drums. Check it with, without. Bam. So there's that little bit of smackiness. I think I may dial back on that high shelf a bit. It's maybe a bit much there. And then I'm going to hop over to a graphical EQ and do a bit more clean-uppiness. I am going to cut out some low end. Probably about 50 to 60 hertz, because I will want the bass to fill out the sub frequencies in the low end on this kick. And I'll want to have the kick sitting above the bass, like somewhere between, 150 and 200 hertz. So here I'm going to do a boost. Think about 150 on the nose is where I kind of want that to live. And then I'm going to get rid of some icky stuff right above that. There it is. Right around 300. All right. And then I'll probably just do another little upper mid boost here, somewhere between 4 and 6,000 hertz. A little bit of responsible gain staging here, without. Maybe bring this low cut down a touch. I'll probably revisit that low end once I start getting the bass into the mix here in a bit. But for now, with the kick processing, without it. All right, and then we're going to hop over to the snare. Same deal, SSL channel strip. We're going to boost some top end. It's pretty gnarly boost there. Then I'll do the same thing with the upper mid boost, because I want it to crack a little harder. Right there, right around 6K. And then I'm going to look for some ugly stuff between 2 and 300 hertz. That's it right there. And then again, I'm going to look probably between 150 and 200 hertz here for a little low shelf boost on the snare. With snares, I like to kind of boost slightly below the fundamental. If you boost right on the fundamental in a snare, can get a little wonky. So yeah, just generally I'll kind of find where the fundamental sits, and then I'll mix it. I'll boost it a little bit below there. All right, so let's dial in some compression. Again, we're going to go 3.5-ish to 1 ratio. Quicker release, slower attack here on the attack setting. Dial this in. These hard hits, about 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. All right, then we're going to level match this without. Without. All right, and then we're going to hit our Pro EQ again. Again, I'm just going to hack out some low end here, probably low 60 to 70. Well, maybe even up as high as like 80, 90. Maybe even up a little higher to really open up the low frequency for the bass. Probably not going to go over 120. And then I'm going to boost below the fundamental, which is right around 150, 160 hertz. And then there's going to be some icky stuff around there that I'm going to have to deal with right there, I think. Oh, yeah, we're gonna tuck that out of there. Again, we'll probably just do a boost somewhere around in here. I'm going to sweep around, find where it sounds best. A little more responsible gaining here. Here's with our snare channel, without it. With it. Yeah, sounds a lot better with it. So we're going to pass over the toms for now. And we're going to go over here and we're going to hit the cymbal sum track because we need to get some processing going here. Something that I like to do on cymbals that I'd forgotten to tag on here is at the very beginning of my cymbal chain, I will throw on this DF Clarify plugin, and I'll just kind of set it in the real-time mode with the Clarify about here. What is that, about 1, 2 o'clock? And then I'll put the amount around 1, 2 o'clock, and I'll just let you hear what that does. This is just it deals with some nasty resonance stuff, and it does some like dynamics processing as well. It's just just check it out. So without, with. Without, with. This one, it doesn't work like Soothe does. If you're familiar with Soothe, you can really mangle a source with Soothe if you're not careful. This one is a bit more forgiving, and it just kind of cleans up some harshness, and it really just kind of gives you just a more usable signal sound, more usable cymbal sound. The next thing I'm going to do is I like to throw some like a little bit of juice on my cymbal tracks before I get to my channel strip. So I'm going to add in this London module to my mix rack channel strip here. I'm going to put it in the push mode. I'm going to crank this a little bit. With this one, you've kind of got to be careful with the output because it does add a pretty heroic gain boost. So with it, without it. See, it just adds a little sizzle, a little kind of stank to the cymbal sound, and which I like a lot. So on this, also the snare is really hot in these overheads. So I'm going to set this compressor. I'm going to do a super fast attack, super fast release, super high ratio, and I'm going to drag the threshold down until this is just really pinching the snare, because that snare is super pokey in those overheads, which I really want a lot of that energy from the snare to be coming from the close mic track, and then the room sample track that we'll treat later. But here's how I'll do this using just the threshold control on this compressor. Yeah, you can see the gain reduction is only kicking in really when the snare hits. And something else that I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out some low end using this high pass filter and this channel strip plugin. Probably up to about 200 to 300 hertz, honestly. I just want to get all that low frequency stuff out of there. But yeah, here's without this compressor. Hear how hot that snare is compared to everything else with the compressor. And then beyond that, I'll just give a little top end boost. I may take this mid filter and look for anything gross. That's a little funky on the toms and the snare. Like pull a little bit of that out. All right, so the next thing I'm going to move on to in my cymbal sum track is the Purple Audio MC77. With this, I'm going to do pretty quick attack, pretty quick release. With this, I'll have to move this headroom control down. And these, I'm going to slap this a little bit. The reason I do this is just because it adds like a nice amount of aggression. Without. Probably bump that down a touch. Maybe too extreme. Without. Just adds a little bit of excitement, a little bit of sizzle. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit an EQ. Again, I'm going to reinforce that low cut, probably around 250. And in cymbals, there's usually some harsh frequencies, somewhere between 4 and 6K, which I'm going to hunt those down. Oh, right there. And then there may be some a little lower also. Yep, there it is. Duck that out just a touch. Then I'll add in a high shelf here, like up above the nastiness. Then I'll gain this down a touch, because I know I've added some level here. And with our channel strip, without. Okay, so at this point, I think I'm ready to probably we'll blend in the toms now. We'll process these toms. All right, let me find somewhere. Let me find somewhere where I've got a good amount of tom action going on here. Let's see. There we go. This will probably work. This couple of measures. Yep, so that gives us a couple measures here. So we've got some tom action. Let me go ahead and hop to my tom sum. Again, I'm going to start here with the SSL channel strip. Sometimes on my live tom mics, I'll have a noise gate, but honestly, like Tyler, he did such a great job cleaning these drums up that I didn't have to use any gates anywhere. So they sound really good. Everything's consistent. Sometimes, like if toms are not recorded well, you'll have to process each one on a track. But if they're recorded consistently with like good miking and like reasonably good heads, like you'll be able to process these at a bus, because yeah. So let's go ahead and we'll just EQ these. The same 8K high shelf. All right, and then also going to do a boost here in the upper mids. All right, and then there's definitely some icky stuff. Like I can already hear it. I just need to sweep it out. Get that out of there. Then I'm going to bring in a little bit of low end. Between 100 and 200 hertz. There it is. Let's see, with and without. Definitely need to gain match that a little bit, but definitely sounds a lot better. And then for the compression, you're gonna do the same general kind of vibe of compression that I've done with the rest of the drums. All right, and so then I'm gonna hit my graphic EQ, filter out some of the sub frequencies so we're not fighting the bass and the kick. Again, boost here in the low end. Then I'll clean up some low mids because it's there. Yeah. Wow. All right, and on toms, usually somewhere between 800 and 1,000 hertz, you can get like a range of frequencies that just kind of sounds like you're hitting like a plastic bucket that you get from like Lowe's. Check it out. There it is. So I do like to notch out a little bit of that as well. And then I'll do a similar kind of upper mid boost. Bam. Little gain stuff there with our channel strip, without it. See, it's kind of sick what you can do with just EQ and a little bit of compression on stuff. A little bit goes a long way. All right, so next up we're going to move down to our room sample track. We can get this off a loop, thank God. So we'll hop over to the room sample track and we're just going to dial this in a little bit. This is really just snare and toms, room samples. I do like to do a similar thing here using that London module, slam it a bit. Even push up the gain here a bit sometimes. So then I'll hit the SSL channel strip once again. Here I'm going to take out a good bit of low end, probably up to about 120 to 150. Boost some top end. Maybe boost the little upper mids here, we'll see. will definitely get rid of some low mids. Then the Purple Audio MC77, again, on here, it's going to be really quick attack, really quick release. Probably a 12-to-1 ratio. I'm going to be really aggressive with this. The super aggressive compression on the room tracks really just makes them just super explosive. That's maybe a bit much. Maybe not. We'll hit the EQ. Again, gonna get rid of some low. That's pretty nasty. That needs to go. And then in these, usually there's some stuff up here around 4 to 5K that's pretty gross. Yep. And then let's look. Right there, that's pretty nasty. So that's with our channel strip. Here's without it on the room samples. With. All right, so our drums are sounding pretty cool. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make an effects send from my kick, snare, and my toms. I'm going to add a little bit of parallel compression here. What the parallel compression does is it can add a little bit of sustain, and it can add a little bit of weight to the drums, and you can do that without killing the transient. I'm sure you saw, like, while I was mixing these drums, I was doing pretty slow attack times on the compression. That's because I am going to do a parallel drum compression track. I'm going to route this to my drum bus, so this is going to feed out with the rest of my drums. I'm going to call this Drum Murder because, I mean, we're about to crush these boys. So very first thing that I'm going to do is add the Purple Audio MC77 again. We're going to drop that headroom down to nothing. We're going to hold here. We're going to try to do something pretty dumb. We're going to do all buttons in mode. And we're just going to annihilate this. Then I'll add in mix rack. Actually, I can just drag a mix rack from my room overheads, or my overheads are my cymbals. Here we go. Yep. Drum Murder. And we're going to drag this mix rack because I want these two pieces to come after that 1176 on this channel, and then a Pro EQ because we gonna need it. All right, so let's look at my strip here. We're gonna bump this way down. Fast attack, fast release. We're just gonna all right, and something that I do with these is I'll adjust my send levels a little bit because I'm going to pull the kick down and I'm going to pull the toms down. I want the snare to be the kind of primary driving force of what this compressor is doing. Hop back over here, see what that did. There we go. Then we'll hit this, and we're just gonna destroy these a little bit. Then we're going to EQ this. Definitely going to get out a lot of low end. We don't need that much low end coming from this. We'll even want to sweep out some of that. I'm going to pull that out. That's a little gross sounding. And then there will usually be something up here that's pretty harsh and nasty. Alright, so that's with, without. Way too loud, but we'll dial that back a touch. Without, with. All right, so then there is some processing that I'll do at my drum bus here. So I'm going to start with the UAD 1073. This one I like on the drum bus a lot for the EQ. And then we'll also add the UAD distressor. We're going to bypass him for now. And then we're going to also add Mo TT from Slate. This we're going to bypass for now. So we're going to starting with this 1073 EQ. I'm going to enable that EQ. With this on my drum bus, I like to just do a little bit of boost at 110. Just to fatten up the low end a touch. And then a little high shelf boost. Without, with. All right, so then we're going to hit this distressor. I'm going to go at 4-to-1 ratio. I'm going to go with the slowest attack and the fastest release. And then we're going to dial this in. So we're doing about 3 to 5 dB of gain reduction. Have to back that off a bit. Help if I turned it on. It's kind of like where I like that one to sit. That might be a bit much on the snare. Okay, I think that sounds a bit better. Then I'll engage. I really like the yellow distortion mode on the drum bus. That's without it. That's with it. Let me gain match that a little better. That's just a touch of glue across the entire drum kit, a little bit of cohesion. And then the last thing I like to do on my drum bus is this Mo TT. I start this with a mix probably around 15%. Like on its own, it sounds absurd. But as you dial back the mix, it can sound really cool. Without. Without. Sometimes it can make the top end a bit too rough, so I'll usually dial that top band back a touch. And sometimes I may even come back here and just turn down my overheads a bit. All right, so let's dial in some bass guitar. And I know that I'm going to use the bass alpha track. I know that I'm not going to use these. So the very first thing I'm going to do is check my gain staging on my... Oh. Yeah, not killing anything too hard there. Then I'm going to hit hit MC77. For bass, I'll usually start with about a medium attack and a pretty quick release. Maybe have to dial this headroom back a touch. I really want this compressor to kind of pin the bass, so I will play with this attack time. Fastest attack. Slowest attack. I do like how that transient sounds, so I'll probably land somewhere in the middle. With this compressor, without it. I actually think the bass needs to be louder alongside the drums. Outer strip with it. Alright, so now let's hit some EQ on the bass. I will low cut the bass, but really low, like around like 30 hertz. And I'm usually going to boost somewhere between 50 and 60 hertz on my bass. If you remember back to the section where I did the kick, I boosted the kick between 150 and 200 hertz. So I'm going to find the frequency where the bass and the kick are fighting here, and I'm going to notch that on the kick, or on the bass. That's it, right there. Oh, wrong button. Here we go. The 500 region and bass can be messy sometimes, so I'm going to check that out. Yeah, that's a little funky there. And then I do like to boost maybe sometimes somewhere between 1 and 2K, so I'll fish around here, see if there's anything in that region that sounds kind of cool. Kind of seems like the grunt of this lives around 2K. And then I'll take this last band and I'll turn that to a peaking band from a shelving band, and I'm going to do a sweep here to find like some icky upper mids. Yeah, about right there. So then I'm going to hop up to my my bass bus. I'm going to add a couple pieces here. I'm going to add this Bus Glue bass, Joel Wanasek plugin. Super dope piece here. And then I'm going to add another instance of an EQ here. And the thing that I really like about this compressor is you can select your bass position, which I like to have the bass below the kick. Some people will mix with their bass above the kick. I like to go below. And then you can select to compress either the low end frequencies or the high end frequencies. So I'm going to start by compressing the low end individually. Thinking maybe my 60 hertz boost was a bit much. I might dial that back by a decibel or two. It's just interacting with that compressor in a weird way, so probably should nerf that a bit. So now I'll hit the top end. With that, without it. And sometimes I'll throw another layer of EQ back here, just in case there's anything too wacky going on. It seems like May still be fighting the kick a little bit here. Boost that sub a little bit back. It sounds better after that compressor than before it. And then lastly, on my bass bus, I like to use this plugin called Track Spacer. What this does is apply an inverse EQ curve based off a sidechain input. So I can set this to you know, just trigger below 200 hertz, and I can configure a side chain here by hitting that button, then this button, and I'm going to grab a send from my kick sum. So now I can dial in a little bit of tucking of the sub when the kick hits. You can see, dial that in. 4 to 6% usually is kind of the sweet spot for me. And that just kind of cleans up the low end. Tuck that back a little bit as well. With Track Spacer, without it. You can hear how much cleaner the low end gets when the kick is just ducking out the bass a touch there. All right, so moving on from our bass bus, we're going to start hitting some guitars. For the lead guitars, I will wait until after I've got the vocals locked in to hit them. So I am going to go ahead and just mute this lead some for now, but I do want to dial in our rhythm guitars. All right, so this is our guitar tone on its own. Super bottom endy, super saturated, super gross guitar tone. Love it. Now this is all tube amps. This is it's an Ibanez RG550 with Seymour Duncan Nazgul sending it set into a JHS Bonsai, into a PV JSX, into a reactive load box, into an RME. So super cool signal chain. And you know, I dialed it in really low endy, really saturated. I really took some time dialing in this guitar tone. The cab blend is ridiculous. It's a blend of like 5 different cabinets. So let's go ahead and start EQing that, and I want to have this in context. So with this being such a bottom endy guitar tone, I'm probably am gonna like low cut this at somewhere around 100 hertz. Just go way too high, and you can hear that it just kind of neuters the track. Probably about 120 hertz on this. I will also do a sweep to see if there's anything fighting the kick in a weird way. Yeah, a lot of build up there. So I will just pull out that frequency just a touch, just to control that low end of the guitars. And then I'm going to do a boost. I like to boost somewhere around 1K usually. I'll sweep around and find where it sounds best. That's just kind of where the grunt of the guitars lives, like the kind of the funk, the nastiness, the goodness of the guitars. Without it. With it. Something else I'll do is with guitars, usually somewhere between 3 and 6K, there's some really nasty, harsh frequencies. So I'm going to do a wider cut there and dip that out. You'll see some people will do like a ton of super narrow cuts here. That works, and that's definitely a way to do it. I like to do a wider cut. With the super narrow cuts, I found that those frequencies actually shift based on where you're playing on the neck, and it can actually kind of sound weird and phasey if you've got a ton of like super narrow cuts. So I'll just normally do one wider cut, just kind of get the whole general area where the ick happens. There it is. So then I'll just scoop that out by a couple decibels. With the EQ, without the EQ. Everything just sits a lot better. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this BG guitars, the bus glue guitars from JST. Chug Slayer always on the rhythm guitars. What this does is it adds a little bit of like multi-band compression to the sub frequencies when they build up on the chugs. Super nice for cleaning up the low end on your guitars. And this compressor just in general sounds really good on guitars. I like to just link this, and I'll just... Oh, it would help if I turned it on. But yeah, so I like to link this. Give them a little bit of squeeze. With, without. Again, just kind of cleans up and locks in the low end of the guitars. All right, so these are very, very dark guitars. So I'm going to counter that with a couple stages of EQ here. The cleanup EQ happens here. These are a couple layers of additive EQ. The very first thing I'm going to do is, again, this magical SSL 8K shelf. Oh, again, turn it on. A little bit there. I don't like to go too much with this on guitars because you can hear it does kind of get weird. Right around there, it's kind of the sweet spot, and then I'll do an upper mid boost again where that kind of grunt of the guitar is at. Sweep around here. That's with that. Without it. With it. Level match it. All right, and then the last step in my rhythm guitar bus is the Pultec EQ. Let me engage that. I'll generally put that around 5K, and I'm going to boost this a bit more. All right, and so here's our rhythm guitars with our channel strip and without it. Whoa, what a difference. Might dial this back just a touch. Without the channel strip, with it. That. I think I need to let some of this low end breathe. I think I've got too much cut out. Did some slight balance adjustments there just to kind of get everything sitting a little better together. Because of that, I will need to readjust the threshold on my mix bus compressor. Sweet. So moving on from the rhythm guitars, again, I said earlier that I was going to wait until after I got the vocals kind of locked in to really mess with the lead guitars, because it's kind of a call and response thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start working the vocals. I'm going to start with the vocal main. Let me just hit that there. And I'm just going to knock out all these buses for a second, and even this vocal dub. Oh, did it again. Then I'm going to grab a track where there's a lot of just vocal mains going on. All right, so I usually will dial in the compressor on vocals before anything. With vocals, I like pretty quick release and about a medium attack. We'll kind of adjust that attack time based on how much transient I want coming through in the vocals.
I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death.
Okay, so there is definitely some EQ stuff that I'm gonna have to deal with, and I might actually pop this EQ first here in my chain.
As the fluid really blows.
That needs to go.
As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make
Our
what I
stuff
want,
up here.
momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows.
And then after this, I'll try and hit a shelf here.
In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows.
Magical SSL 8K shelf for the win.
Momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion.
The faster attack sounds like, the slower attack sounds like.
As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking.
All right, so after this compressor, with the vocals, I do kind of really want to pin them down. So I'm just going to pull up an L1 limiter.
As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion. Something whack, I'll bring it to your death. As the fluid really blows. In a single breaking bones, I make what I want, momentary explosion.
Just doing a bit more EQ there. I was just cleaning up some just more nasty stuff that I was checking as I compressed and limited these harder. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna copy this chain to all the rest of these vocal tracks. I may need to adjust some stuff a little down the pipes, and if I do, that's totally cool. But the very first thing that I want to do is just get this same kind of vocal sound on all the vocal tracks. Then I am definitely going to have to do some gain staging here, because this is going to be ridiculous. This vocal main dub, I'm going to pull it way down. Let's hop back here to the top of the song. Definitely need to drag these down. All right, so I am noticing that these vocals really need some de-esser going on. We're gonna go with the good old waves. No, I thought de-esser mono. Bam. Here we go.
As the fluid freely flows, in a single breaking bones that make one by one. Pulmonary expulsion, choke them wet, or bring them to your death. As the fluid freely flows, in a single breaking bones that make one by one. Pulmonary expulsion, choke them wet, or bring them to your death. As the fluid freely flows,
that's with. Here's without.
As the fluid freely flows, in a single breaking bones that make one by one. Pulmonary expulsion.
Yep, that just cleans up those S's a bit. When you really start compressing and limiting vocals, you will definitely bring out some sibilants, some harsh S's, and so on. A little bit of de-esser action can clean that right up. I may actually be riding that de-esser a little too hard. So I'm going to back off on that a touch. If you overdo it with a de-esser, you can give the vocalist a little bit of a lisp. You don't want to do that. So dial back on that a touch. Then I think the vocals are just hitting this bus too hot now in general. And something that I do like to do on the vocal bus is I really like this Manly Very compressor. I'll set that on the slowest attack with the fastest release. And I'll dial the threshold back. So I'm just doing a handful of decibels of gain reduction, like 2-3 decibels. And then I'll just gain that up a little bit with the attack. All right, yeah, because I like the way that little bit of glue compression sounds there. It'll help even out the vocals, especially in an extreme track like this. That kind of helps. All right, so let's get our leads locked in here now that we've got our vocals dialed in pretty low. All right, so I'm just going to start with this first little chunk of this. All right, very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over here to ye old SSL channel. So I'm just going to gain these up a bit. Back to the SSL channel. A little bit of top end boost. I'm also going to boost somewhere in the upper mids here. Then I'm going to probably go to about a 5-to-1 ratio on the compressor. We'll still do a pretty quick release time. And I'm just going to use this to... This is essentially just going to even out the guitars, and I am gonna high pass these up to probably about 120, 130 hertz. Then I'll hit one last layer of EQ here and cut out some low end. I'm gonna find the harsh stuff. Right there. Just in a little highs. Maybe not, because that's, I mean, those are not super top ending. Come back here to the SSL for a little more high end. Here's without our guitar processing. All right, so now I'm gonna just copy everything over to the second lead guitar track. That way, all the plugin settings and all that I've applied here are carried over to the second lead guitar track. And then I'm gonna do a little bit of volume automation with these real quick. So in Studio One, to do volume automation, you can just right click on your volume parameter, edit automation volume, create a couple, oh, wrong button again, create a couple automation lanes here. And then I'm going to extend my loop region to be the whole solo. So here, I'm definitely gonna automate this to fade out here. Here, I'm gonna copy this automation and I'm going to drop it back here at the back at where this lead comes back in. Well, I guess Studio One just decided it's not doing that today. will automate down this last note just a little bit, make it kind of tail off a little faster. Oh. All right, so I'm just gonna cut that out in post, whatever. All right, so might want to turn this down a little bit. All right. All right. Something that I do like to do on lead guitars when it's like a call and response thing with vocals here is pull up track spacer again. And what I'll do is I'll add my sidechain source to come from my vocal bus. Send, bam, vocal bus. And then this is just going to do an inverse EQ curve on the lead guitar bus of what is happening on the vocals. Give those vocals a bit more space. With. Did that not go on the bus? Without. Just helps the lead guitars and the vocals not fight each other, because the lead guitars are a little hot. The vocals also are a little hot. If you get those two signals trying to go at the same time, they will fight and rub up against each other in a bad kind of way. But this track spacer is a good way to mitigate that, because it'll just duck out a little bit of what is happening on the vocals from the guitars. All right, and something else that I'm hearing that some automation is going to come in handy on is going to be on this kick drum track where the fast like bursts of double kick. I'm getting some low end build up that is kind of wacky, and it's a little bit over the top. So what I'll do to deal with that is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this plugin in automation mode, automation right. And then I'm just going to hit play, and I'm just going to grab a parameter there. And you can see that generated an automation lane. So then I'm going to turn this to read. What I've done here is I've created an automation lane for the amount of my low shelf boost. I can use this automation lane to change the amount of the boost that's applied there anywhere that there's a burst of double kick stuff happening in the song. I'm just going to delete these points that were drawn in whenever I grab that while I had it in write mode. I just do that because it's the easiest way that I found to just generate an automation lane for something. Just put it in write mode, bam, done, grab it. So, all right, so when I say double kick burst, I'm not talking about even like the blast beats. I'm talking about stuff like this. So what I'll do here is I'll grab that, and I'm just going to automate this down a little bit, and that'll help my low end stay cleaner. And I'll show you what happens on this plugin when that automation happens. Watch this guy. So what that is doing is just lowering the amount of the low shelf boost anywhere where there is a burst of double kick hits. So I'm also going to do that right here. This just, again, you know, this is about keeping the low end of the song tidy. is that those bursts of double kick, that fat low end in the kick builds up, and it doesn't sound good. If you listen to that on a system with a sub, it's gonna just blow everything out right there. So that's why something like this is a good move in those situations. So I'm just going through, automating that down a bit in all these double kick bursts. Now, if it's something that's like just like 2 or 3 hits, I'll normally leave it alone. But if it's more than a hand, if it's more than like 4 or 5 hits, like we duck in that a little bit. I really think that the only places that really happens are in that little chorus bit. So here we go. Here's one. Automation is honestly sick. I mean, because you can get super creative with it. You can do a lot of really cool effects with automation, like such as like sweeping like EQ filters. You can automate parameters on certain effects plugins to get interesting sounds. The sky is really the limit with automation because almost every parameter on everything is automatable. So if you can dream it, you can do it. This is just one example of how I'll use automation to say, you know, keep the low end from getting too blown out in a track. All right, so there is that automation. And I just want to, for shits and giggles, I want to A/B this against the original mix that I did for the song. So I'm going to start it here at the top of the track with just the original mix versus what I've done this evening. It's honestly kind of not fair because this mix is mastered. This one is not. Let me just slam this a bit harder, get it closer to level. Vocals are a touch too loud, I think. The drums also, I think, are a bit too loud. Original mix. What I've done today. All right, so what I'm doing now is basically when I'm mixing a song, I don't mix it like from start to finish, like in one sitting. If I don't have to, like there have been times where I have, because like tight deadlines, last second deadlines, that kind of stuff. So I mean, it can be done, but typically what I'll do is I'll mix for about 1.5 to 2 hours, and then at that point, typically your ears will be fatigued. So it's good to just walk away for a little bit. and come back to a mix later, because you may catch some stuff that like sounds wacky, or weird balance stuff that you can do inadvertently, like once your ears start to get fatigued. So I just want to go ahead and just give this a good listen. Here's where we're at with everything. Okay, so a couple things that I'm noticing like straight away as I play this. It feels like the kick is kind of sitting on top of everything else. The kick is just kind of crushing the rest of the drums. So something that I may do here will probably go to this UAD Neve EQ on my bus. Well, see, that's not really doing much. May just like pull that down to 0 or just above 0. Just kind of like mellow out that low end a bit, just because that kick is totally crushing everything else. And then I'm going to hit this kick channel, and what I'll probably end up doing is pulling back on this boost a little bit on my graphical EQ, maybe by about 3 decibels or so. And then I may even like bump up my low cut filter a little bit, closer to 60-70 hertz, and I'll give that a listen now and see how that sits. Oh, thank you, Studio One. May even just use this gain knob here to just bump that down by a decibel or so. Okay, so now it kind of feels like maybe there's not enough low end, so I'm probably going to bring this boost up again, where I've cut out more low end here and at my drum bus. And maybe it's got a touch too much top end even. Just those couple little changes there just made it sit a lot better. And something else that I noticed, these vocal stereo tracks could use a bit of automation, just because the volumes, they kind of go in and out, and some parts they're a little too quiet, some parts are a little too loud. So we'll roll through some vocals. I'm just gonna right click, edit automation volume. I'm just referring to some volume automation here. Okay. I will open these just so I can see where everything's happening on the waveforms while I'm rolling through this. This line here could be automated up a touch. And when I'm doing automation, a lot of times I'll make the automation lane bigger. It gives you a little better kind of like fine adjustment potential. If you do this with it really small, like you'll just get wild swings in your automation when you really don't need to do much most of the time. Probably even automate these down a little bit on that last syllable there. Once these vocals start, so I'll drop points here and here. Drop another point there, so nothing after that changes. And just automate that down by a couple decibels there. No, it looks like those actually should have started a little farther back. Bring them back to about right there. Sometimes when you're automating, what you're doing is just creating space for other stuff that is coming in and out. Which I dropped the last little bit of that syllable on the vocal mains to give these stereo vocals a bit more room. All right, let's see, we got some more up here. Yeah. That guy can come up a bit. And then we got some dubs. These could definitely come up a bit there to give that a little bit more kind of just nastiness, you know. Those highs are brutal. I'm going to bring my lead sum bus down a little bit because that's honestly pretty loud. Probably a couple decibels. Yeah, that sits a lot better. You know, as you know, I'm a guitar player, but when I'm mixing, you know, music, I've gotta think like a mixer, not a guitar player, because it's easy to just be like, oh, you know, the lead guitar should rule all. No, it shouldn't, especially not in a section like this where it's a call and response thing. Like Seth and I are really kind of like working off of each other, the way this works in the song. Yeah, I think I'm gonna pull up like all of this vocal part throughout the chorus. Okay, so it looks like we've got some more stereo vocals up here. Probably bump these up a little bit. I love Seth's highs. Like, that guy is a monster. I think in the original mix I had these like much louder in this part, but I kind of don't mind how this all sits together. I'm gonna bring these stereo highs up a touch. Might bring these boys up just a touch. Know that I'm going to bring these up again. So I'll probably leave all that, like just how it's sitting. I like the way that all balances. Probably will pull these guys up a touch because I heard them and I want more of them. Yeah. Yep, there it is. So yeah, let's compare that to the original mix again. Just kind of see where we're at. Here's the original mix. All right, here's the new mix. Original. New. The toms are kind of slightly more present in the original mix, which I like. So what I'm probably just going to do here is just give them a decibel or so of a boost. And now, check it out again. May give them a little bit of an EQ boost on the top end. Maybe give it some more of this. That dark desire, and the blue and really blue, and until you did, I saw we were. I died with the compared to the original. original. No. So yeah, pretty cool. You know, it's not an exact one-to-one of the original. I mean, the only way to do that would really be to just open that session. 'Cause I'm going to be honest, I don't remember what all I used on everything. I don't know how I did everything. I even used a bunch of different plugins on this one than I did on the original mix that I did for the track. So yeah, really hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, drop me a comment. I'll try to get back to them as I can. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.